They say eavesdropping never leads to anything good. Well, they're right about that much. But sometimes the truth hits you like a freight train carrying a load of dynamite, and you either get crushed or you learn to use the explosion to your advantage. My name is Grant Ellison, and I'm what you'd call aggressively average. 37 years old, 5'10" on a good day, brown hair that's starting to thin at the crown, and the kind of face that disappears in a crowd. I'm an accountant at Henderson & Associates, which means I spend my days making sure other people's numbers add up, while my own life apparently doesn't. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. For 8 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage with Lora Finch. She kept her maiden name, said it was for professional reasons since she'd built her reputation as a dental hygienist. Looking back, I should have known she was keeping her options open. Lora is beautiful in that wholesome girl-next-door way that makes men turn their heads at the grocery store. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a smile that could sell toothpaste commercials. She's 35, 3 years younger than me, and has always been the social butterfly in our relationship. Where I prefer quiet nights at home with a good book and a beer, she thrives on parties, gossip, and being the center of attention. The cracks started showing about 2 years ago when we began trying for kids. Month after month of negative pregnancy tests, doctor visits, and increasingly tense conversations about fertility treatments. Lora became obsessed with getting pregnant, and I became the convenient scapegoat for our struggles. Maybe if you weren't so stressed about work all the time, she'd say, as if my dedication to providing for our family was somehow sabotaging her ovaries. But 6 weeks ago, everything changed. Lora announced she was pregnant, glowing with that radiant happiness I hadn't seen in years. I was thrilled, relieved, and honestly a little surprised. The timing felt off. We'd barely been intimate in months. But miracles happen, right? Wrong. The truth came crashing down last Saturday night at a party thrown by Jake Morrison, one of Lora's co-workers from the dental clinic. Jake's house is one of those open-concept suburban McMansions with too much space and not enough personality. The kitchen flows into the living room, which opens onto a deck overlooking a kidney-shaped pool that probably gets used twice a year. I was nursing my second beer in the corner, watching Lora hold court near the kitchen island. She was wearing a flowing blue dress that cleverly disguised her early pregnancy bump, her hands gesturing animatedly as she told some story to her audience of admirers. That's when I noticed Wade Fuller leaning against the counter nearby, watching her with the kind of predatory smile that made my stomach turn. Wade is everything I'm not, tall, muscular, with the kind of confident swagger that comes from never having to work very hard for anything. He's a dental assistant at the same clinic where Lora works, drives a BMW he can't afford, and has the personality of a used car salesman who thinks he's doing you a favor. I was heading to the bathroom when I heard Lora's voice drifting from the hallway. She was standing with her best friend Sabrina, both of them clearly several drinks past tipsy. "I swear, Sabrina, this baby is going to be gorgeous," Lora was saying, her words slightly slurred. "Wade has such amazing genes." Sabrina giggled. "What about Grant? Won't he be suspicious when the kid comes out looking like a Greek god instead of an accountant?" "Please," Lora laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "My loser husband will be paying for our baby and won't even know it. Wade gets all the fun, Grant gets all the bills. It's perfect." They dissolved into drunken laughter while I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling like someone had just reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with a rusty spoon. I didn't confront them. I didn't storm out. I simply walked back to my corner, finished my beer, and waited for Lora to decide she was ready to leave. During the drive home, she chattered excitedly about the party while I made appropriate sounds at the right moments, my mind already shifting into the analytical mode that had made me good at my job. Numbers don't lie. but people sure as hell do. And I had just been promoted to auditor-in-chief of my own life. The beautiful thing about being an accountant is that you develop certain skills over the years. Attention to detail, pattern recognition, the ability to follow paper trails that other people think they've covered up. Most importantly, you learn patience, the kind of cold, calculating patience that lets you gather evidence before making your move. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own house. I observed. I documented. I said nothing. Lora's behavior patterns were easier to track than a teenager's spending habits. She'd started deleting her text messages immediately after reading them, something she'd never done before. Her phone was always face down now, and she'd developed a nervous habit of checking it every few minutes. Prenatal yoga had become her excuse for being out 3 nights a week, despite the fact that she'd previously shown about as much interest in yoga as I had in competitive bodybuilding. These sessions apparently required extensive preparation, since she'd spend an hour getting ready to go stretch and breathe with other pregnant women. The insurance paperwork was what really gave her away. I handle all our finances, so when the forms from Dr. Nguyen's office arrived, I naturally reviewed them. Under emergency contact, Lora had listed Wade Fuller instead of me. Her own husband wasn't even the backup plan. That's when I knew I had her. Dr. Nguyen's office is one of those modern medical facilities that tries too hard to be welcoming. Soft lighting, nature photography on the walls, and classical music playing at just the right volume to be soothing without being intrusive. I accompanied Lora to her 12-week appointment, playing the role of excited father-to-be. We'd like to do some additional genetic screening, I told Dr. Nguyen during the consultation. Family history of genetic disorders on my side. It was a lie, but a plausible one. Dr. Nguyen nodded professionally and added the prenatal paternity test to the list of dirty work. Lora never questioned it. She was too busy glowing and asking about morning sickness remedies. The test would take 2 weeks for results. I used that time to prepare for war. My lawyer, Ms. Harper, has an office downtown in one of those glass towers that make you feel important just by walking through the lobby. She's about 50, with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that cuts through bullshit like a scalpel through tissue. "You want to discuss your options regarding paternity fraud," she said after I'd explained the situation. It wasn't a question. "I want to discuss my options regarding everything," I replied. "Divorce, financial protection, legal separation from any responsibility for a child that isn't mine." She leaned back in her leather chair, studying me with the calculating gaze of someone who'd seen this scenario play out dozens of times. "The paternity test will be crucial. Once we have those results, we can file to disclaim paternity before the birth. Texas law is fairly clear on this. If you can prove the child isn't yours, you can't be held financially responsible. What about the house? Our joint accounts? You're married, so it's complicated. But if we can prove adultery and fraud, we can argue for a more favorable division of assets. Start documenting everything, her behavior, any admissions, financial irregularities." I was already 3 steps ahead of her. That evening, I installed a voice recording app on my phone and started carrying it everywhere. I also began the delicate process of protecting our joint finances. Nothing illegal, just moving money into accounts that were solely in my name, changing passwords, and making sure I had copies of every important document. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a plain white envelope that might as well have been a nuclear weapon. I opened it in my car outside the office, hands surprisingly steady. Probability of paternity, 0%. The numbers were in. Jackpot. But who was the real winner here? I drove home with the envelope in my jacket pocket, feeling like I was carrying dynamite. Lora was in the kitchen making dinner, humming some pop song while she stirred pasta sauce. She looked so content, so blissfully unaware that her world was about to implode. "How was your day, honey?" she asked without turning around. "Educational," I replied. Very educational. I waited until Saturday morning to drop the bomb. Lora was at the kitchen table in her bathrobe, scrolling through her phone while eating cereal. The picture of domestic tranquility, if you ignored the fact that she was probably texting her lover. I set the envelope down next to her bowl. "What's this?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "DNA results from Dr. Nguyen's office. Turns out that genetic screening I requested included a paternity test." The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her phone clattered onto the table. "Grant, I can explain." "Can you? Because these numbers are pretty clear. 0% chance that baby is mine." I kept my voice calm, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. She started crying immediately, but they were the wrong kind of tears. Panicked, desperate tears, not the tears of someone who felt genuine remorse. "The test is wrong. Labs make mistakes all the time. You're the father, Grant, I swear." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So you're saying you haven't been sleeping with Wade Fuller?" "No, yes, I'm saying that. Wade and I are just friends." "Friends who discuss your baby's genetics at parties? Friends who you list as your emergency contact instead of your husband?" Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally a kind of calculating desperation that I'd never seen before. "Okay, fine. Yes, Wade and we got close. But it was just a few times. The baby could still be yours." "Could be? So you're admitting you've been sleeping with both of us?" "Don't twist my words." "I'm not twisting anything, Lora. I'm just asking for clarification. You've been having an affair with Wade Fuller, and now you're pregnant with his child, but you were planning to let me raise it and pay for it without ever telling me the truth." She was full-on sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "I never meant for this to happen. Wade doesn't want kids. He's not ready to be a father." "But I am. I'm ready to be a father to another man's child." "You've always wanted kids. You'd be a good dad." The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She was actually trying to frame her betrayal as a favor to me. "Let me get this straight. You cheated on me, got pregnant by another man, and decided I should raise his child because I'd be good at it? Like fatherhood is just another item on my to-do list? That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Lora? Explain it to me like I'm stupid." She couldn't. She just sat there crying while I recorded every word, every admission, every desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. By Monday morning, I had everything I needed: the DNA results, the recorded confession, copies of the insurance forms with Wade's name, and a detailed timeline of her suspicious behavior. Ms. Harper reviewed everything with the satisfaction of a chess master seeing checkmate in 3 moves. "This is excellent documentation," she said. "We can file to disclaim paternity immediately and start divorce proceedings. With this evidence of adultery, we can push for a favorable settlement." "What about Wade? What about him? I want him to face consequences too." She raised an eyebrow. "Legal consequences? He hasn't committed any crimes." "Professional consequences, then." That afternoon, I made an anonymous call to the HR department at Premier Dental, where both Lora and Wade worked. I explained that I had evidence of an inappropriate workplace relationship that had resulted in insurance fraud and potential liability issues for the practice. "I'd be happy to provide documentation," I told the HR representative, a woman named Ms. Patel, who sounded like she dealt with this kind of drama regularly. "Please email everything to our confidential reporting address," she said, with the weary tone of someone who'd seen it all. I sent them everything: the insurance forms, screenshots of Wade's social media posts from times when he and Lora were supposedly at work functions, and a detailed timeline of their affair. I didn't include the DNA results or recorded confession. Those were for the divorce proceedings. 2 days later, I parked across the street from the dental clinic and waited. At 3:47 p.m., Wade stormed out of the building, his face red with anger. 15 minutes later, Lora emerged, walking like someone in a daze. I followed her to the parking lot, where she sat in her car for 20 minutes, crying into her phone. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could guess. Her perfect little arrangement was falling apart, and she was finally starting to understand the consequences of her choices. That evening, she came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. "They suspended us both pending investigation," she said, without preamble. "Us?" "Wade and me. Someone reported our relationship to HR. I wonder who would do such a thing." She looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and desperation. "Grant, we need to talk, really talk, about our future, about the baby, about fixing this." "There's nothing to fix, Lora. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "But what about us? What about our marriage?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "What marriage? You eliminated it the moment you decided Wade Fuller was a better bet than your husband. The only question now is how messy you want the cleanup to be." Ms. Harper's office had become my second home over the past week. We'd filed the paternity disclaimer and initiated divorce proceedings, but I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted total devastation. "The court hearing is scheduled for next Friday," she explained, sliding papers across her mahogany desk. "With the DNA evidence and her recorded admission, this should be straightforward. You'll be legally absolved of any financial responsibility for the child." "What about spousal support?" "Given the adultery and fraud, we can argue against it. The fact that she was planning to deceive you about the child's paternity goes to the heart of the marriage contract." I nodded, but my mind was already moving to the next phase. Legal victory was just the beginning. That evening, I drove to Lora's parents' house in the suburbs. The Finches lived in one of those perfectly manicured neighborhoods where every lawn looks like it was cut with nail scissors, and every house follows the same basic blueprint with minor variations. I'd always had a cordial relationship with Robert and Margaret Finch. They were conservative, religious people who'd raised Lora to believe in traditional values. Values she'd apparently discarded the moment they became inconvenient. Margaret answered the door with her usual warm smile, which faltered slightly when she saw my expression. "Grant, what a surprise. Is Lora with you?" "No, Mrs. Finch. Actually, I came to talk to you and Mr. Finch about Lora. There are some things you need to know." 20 minutes later, I left them with copies of the DNA results and a detailed explanation of their daughter's affair. Margaret was crying. Robert was silent, his face the color of old concrete. "I trusted her," Margaret kept saying. "We raised her better than this." "I trusted her too," I replied, "but trust has to be earned back now." The next evening, I put Phase 2 into motion. Wade's regular hangout was a sports bar called Murphy's, about 10 minutes from the dental clinic. It was the kind of place with too many TVs, sticky floors, and the lingering smell of fried food and desperation. I arrived at 7 p.m. and took a seat at the bar, ordering a beer and waiting. Wade showed up at 7:30 with his girlfriend, Maya, a pretty brunette who worked as a paralegal downtown. I'd done my research. They took a booth near the back, and I could see Wade gesturing angrily while Maya tried to calm him down, probably complaining about the suspension, the investigation, the unfairness of it all. I waited until Maya went to the bathroom, then made my move. "Wade," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Fancy meeting you here." His face went through several expressions before settling on defensive anger. "Grant, what do you want?" "Just wanted to congratulate you on the baby. Must be exciting, becoming a father." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. DNA doesn't lie, Wade. Unlike some people I could mention." He leaned forward, trying to look intimidating. "You need to back off, man. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me? My wife's pregnant with another man's child, and it doesn't concern me? That's interesting logic." Maya returned from the bathroom just as I was pulling out my phone. "Maya, right? I'm Grant. Lora's husband. I think there are some things you should know about your boyfriend. What followed was 15 minutes of the most satisfying conversation I'd had in months. Maya's face went from confusion to shock to fury as I explained Wade's relationship with my wife, showed her the timeline of their affair, and watched her world crumble in real time. "You bastard!" she screamed at Wade, loud enough to turn heads throughout the bar. "You've been cheating on me? With a married woman?" "Maya, let me explain." "Explain what? That you got her pregnant? That you've been lying to me for months?" She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit, pausing only to dump her drink over Wade's head. The entire bar erupted in laughter and applause. Wade sat there dripping with beer and humiliation, his face red with rage. "You snake," he hissed at me. "Careful, Wade. You're talking to the guy who's been documenting everything. Keep it civil." "You think you're so smart, don't you? Playing your little games." "I don't think I'm smart, Wade. I know I'm smart. Smart enough to figure out what you and my wife were up to. Smart enough to gather evidence. Smart enough to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are." I stood up, leaving money on the table for my beer. "Oh, and Wade? You might want to start looking for a new job. I hear the dental clinic is cleaning house." I walked out of Murphy's feeling lighter than I had in months, leaving Wade to face the stares and whispers of the other patrons. In the parking lot, I could see Maya throwing Wade's belongings out of her car. Clothes, CDs, what looked like a toothbrush. Phase 2 was complete. The next morning, Lora called me at work, sobbing. "Grant, you have to stop this. My parents won't talk to me. Wade's girlfriend broke up with him. Everyone at work knows about the affair." "Sounds like the truth is spreading. That's what truth does, Lora. It spreads." "This is vindictive and cruel." "No, Lora. Vindictive and cruel was planning to trick me into raising another man's child. This is just consequences." "I made a mistake. People make mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is double booking dinner plans. Having a months-long affair and committing paternity fraud isn't a mistake. It's a choice, a series of choices." She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the pleading, desperate tone. In its place was something harder, more calculating. "You're going to regret this, Grant. I know things about you, things that could ruin your precious reputation." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Are you threatening me, Lora?" "I'm just saying that maybe we should both be careful about what information gets shared." "Go ahead," I said, hitting the record button on my phone. "Share away. Just remember, I'm the one with all the numbers, and numbers don't lie." The family court hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Friday morning in downtown Houston. The courthouse was one of those imposing government buildings designed to make you feel small and intimidated, with marble floors, high ceilings, and the kind of institutional lighting that makes everyone look guilty. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of documentation. Ms. Harper met me in the hallway, looking confident and professional. "Remember, let me do most of the talking," she said. "Answer questions directly and simply. Don't elaborate, unless asked." Lora arrived 10 minutes late with a court-appointed attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She was showing more now, probably 5 months along, and had chosen an outfit that emphasized her condition, playing for sympathy, no doubt. Judge Patricia Reeves was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd heard every sob story in the book. She reviewed our filing with the methodical attention of a surgeon examining X-rays. "Mr. Ellison, you're seeking to disclaim paternity of the child your wife is carrying. This is a serious matter with long-term consequences for all parties involved." "Yes, Your Honor. I have DNA evidence proving the child is not mine." "And Mrs. Ellison, how do you respond to these allegations?" Lora's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that there may have been marital difficulties, but she maintains that Mr. Ellison could still be the father and that these proceedings are premature. Ms. Harper was on her feet immediately. Your Honor, we have definitive DNA evidence, recorded admissions from Mrs. Ellison acknowledging the affair and confirming that the child's father is Wade Fuller, and documented evidence of insurance fraud. This isn't a case of marital difficulties, it's a clear case of paternity fraud. The judge reviewed our evidence methodically. The DNA results, the recorded conversation, the insurance forms, the timeline of Lora's deception. With each piece of documentation, I could see Lora shrinking further into her chair. Mrs. Ellison, Judge Reeves said finally, do you acknowledge that you had an extramarital affair with Wade Fuller? Lora's lawyer whispered something to her, but she was already breaking down. Yes, she whispered. And do you acknowledge that Mr. Fuller is the biological father of the child you're carrying? Another whispered consultation with her lawyer. Yes. And you were planning to allow Mr. Ellison to believe he was the father and accept financial responsibility for the child. This time, her lawyer tried to object, but Lora was beyond legal strategy. I didn't know what else to do, she sobbed. Wade doesn't want the baby. I thought Grant would be a good father. Judge Reeves looked at her with the kind of expression reserved for people who try to return obviously used merchandise. Mrs. Ellison, what you thought is irrelevant. What matters is what you did. You committed fraud against your husband and attempted to deceive him about one of the most fundamental aspects of parenthood. The ruling was swift and decisive. Paternity disclaimed. No financial responsibility. No legal connection between me and the child. I was officially free. Outside the courthouse, Lora tried one last desperate play. Grant, please, we can work this out. I'll get counseling. We can go to therapy together. Lora, it's over. You destroyed our marriage the moment you decided Wade was a better option. Now you get to live with that choice. But what about the baby? What about my future? That's between you and Wade. I'm sure he'll step up and do the right thing. We both knew that was a lie. That evening, I decided it was time for the final phase of my plan. I'd been monitoring Wade's social media accounts, and I knew he'd been spending his suspended time drinking at various bars around town, complaining to anyone who'd listen about his crazy ex-girlfriend and the psycho husband who'd ruined his life. I found him at a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor, looking exactly like what he was, a man whose life had fallen apart in spectacular fashion. His BMW was parked outside, still gleaming despite everything else going to hell. I waited until he stumbled out around midnight, clearly having had too much to drink. The parking lot was dimly lit, with only a few working streetlights casting long shadows between the cars. Wade, I called out as he fumbled with his keys. He turned around, swaying slightly. Grant, what the hell are you doing here? Just wanted to have a conversation man to man. I got nothing to say to you. That's fine. I'll do the talking. I walked closer, and he backed up against his car. You know what's funny, Wade? You spent months thinking you were so clever, sneaking around with my wife, planning your little future together. But you never thought about what would happen when it all came out, did you? Look, man, I never meant... Sure you did. You meant every bit of it. The affair, the pregnancy, letting me pay for your kid. You just never meant to get caught. I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the side of his BMW, leaving a long, deep scratch in the paint. What the hell? He lunged toward me, but I was ready. I grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him back against the car. Here's what's going to happen, Wade. You're going to stay away from me. You're going to stay away from my house. You're going to take responsibility for your child and stop trying to make this anyone else's problem. Because if you don't, if you try to cause any more trouble for me, I promise you that tonight will seem like a friendly conversation. I let him go and stepped back. He was breathing hard, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you, Wade. I'm educating you. There's a difference. I pulled a stack of papers from my jacket, copies of overdue bills I'd found online, credit reports, loan applications. Wade's financial life was apparently as much of a mess as everything else. Looks like you're going to need a job soon. Better start looking. I dropped the papers on the ground and walked back to my car, leaving him standing there in the parking lot, surrounded by the debris of his own poor choices. 3 days later, Lora showed up at my house at 11 p.m., pounding on the front door like the building was on fire. The storm had been building all day, one of those Texas thunderstorms that starts with oppressive humidity and ends with the sky opening up like a broken dam. By 11 p.m., the rain was coming down in sheets, turning the street into a river and my front yard into a swamp. That's when Lora arrived. The pounding on my door was frantic, desperate. Through the peephole, I could see her standing on my porch, soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her head. She looked like a woman who'd reached the end of her rope and decided to use it as a noose. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Hello, Lora." "Grant, we need to talk. Please, let me in." "I think we've said everything we need to say." "No, we haven't. Not even close." She pushed past me into the living room, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors. I closed the door and turned to face her, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Lora?" "I want you to stop this insanity. The divorce, the paternity thing, all of it. We can work this out." "Work what out? You cheated on me, got pregnant with another man's child, and tried to trick me into raising it. What exactly is there to work out?" She was pacing now, leaving wet footprints on my floor, her movements erratic and desperate. "I made a mistake. I admitted that, but you're destroying my entire life." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to be part of your lies anymore. My parents won't talk to me. I lost my job. Wade won't return my calls. I have nowhere to go. That sounds like a Wade problem. Don't you dare!" She spun around, her face twisted with rage. "This is your fault. You could have just been a man about this, raised the baby, been a father." The sheer audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. Been a man about it? By letting you and your boyfriend make a fool of me? By paying for another man's child while you laugh behind my back? "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that, Lora. I heard you at the party, remember? Laughing about your loser husband who'd pay for everything while Wade got all the fun." She stopped pacing, her chest heaving. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. "Fine. You want to play hardball? I can play hardball too." "What's that supposed to mean?" "I know things about you, Grant. Things that could ruin your precious reputation." I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Such as?" "Such as the time you borrowed money from the Henderson account to cover our mortgage payment. Such as the creative bookkeeping you did for your brother's business. Such as—" "Stop right there." My voice was ice cold. First of all, I never borrowed anything from any client account. Second, helping my brother with his taxes isn't creative bookkeeping. It's called being thorough. And third, if you're threatening to make false accusations against me, you should know that I'm recording this conversation. Her face went white. "You're what?" "Recording. Every word. Just like I recorded your confession about the affair." "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. Texas is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out her next move. That's when we heard the car door slam outside. Through the front window, I could see Wade's BMW in my driveway, the engine still running. He was walking toward the house, his movements aggressive and purposeful. "Did you call him?" I asked. "He followed me here. He's been drinking." Wade didn't bother knocking. He just threw open the door and stormed into my living room, bringing the smell of rain and alcohol with him. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, looking back and forth between Lora and me. "Some kind of intervention?" "Wade, calm down," Lora said, but her voice was shaking. Calm down. My life is ruined. I lost my job, my girlfriend, my apartment, and it's all because of him. He pointed at me with an unsteady finger. Your life is ruined because you made bad choices, I replied calmly. Don't blame me for your lack of judgment. My lack of judgment? You're the one who couldn't keep your wife happy. You're right, I said. I couldn't keep her happy. But then again, neither could you. Otherwise, she wouldn't be here begging me to take her back. Wade's face turned red. She's not begging you for anything. Aren't you, Lora? I turned to her. Isn't that exactly what you're doing? Begging me to forgive you, take you back, raise Wade's child? That's not, because Wade doesn't want the baby, does he? Wade doesn't want the responsibility. Wade just wanted the fun parts. Shut up, Wade said, taking a step toward me. Wade, don't, Lora pleaded. No, let him talk, I said. Let's hear what the father of your child has to say about his responsibilities. I never wanted a kid, Wade exploded. That was her idea. She said she had it handled. She said you'd never find out. Lora gasped. Wade, stop. Stop what? Telling the truth? You said your husband was too stupid to figure it out. You said he'd be grateful to finally have a kid. The pieces were falling into place, and I was recording every word. So this was all planned, I said. Both of you, from the beginning. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Lora whispered. How was it supposed to happen, Lora? You'd have the baby, I'd raise it, and you and Wade would continue your affair behind my back? We weren't going to continue. Bullshit, Wade interrupted. You said once the kid was born and settled, we could figure out how to be together. Wade, please stop talking, Lora begged. But Wade was beyond reason now, fueled by alcohol and desperation. You want to know the truth? He said to me. She never loved you. She told me you were boring, predictable, safe. A meal ticket. Someone to pay the bills while she had her fun. Lora was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of a plan falling apart. Is that true, Lora? I asked. Am I just a meal ticket? She couldn't answer. She just stood there crying while Wade continued his drunken confession. She used to laugh about how easy it was to fool you, how you never questioned anything, never suspected. She said you were the perfect husband for a woman who wanted to have her cake and eat it too. That's when I heard the voices outside. My neighbors had noticed the cars, the shouting, the drama unfolding in my living room. Through the window, I could see people gathering on their porches despite the rain, drawn by the spectacle. Mrs. Patterson from next door was on her phone, probably calling the police. The Johnsons across the street were standing in their doorway, watching like it was primetime television. You know what's funny? I said, my voice calm despite the chaos around me. You're both right. I was easy to fool. I was predictable and trusting and naive. I believed in my marriage, in my wife, in the idea that people generally try to do the right thing. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The rain was still coming down, and I could see more neighbors gathering, some with umbrellas, some just standing in the downpour to get a better view. But you made one crucial mistake, I continued. You assumed that being naive meant being stupid. You assumed that being trusting meant being helpless. I turned back to face them both. I may have been naive, but I'm not stupid. I'm an accountant, remember? I'm very good with details, with evidence, with following paper trails. And when someone steals from me, whether it's money or trust or 8 years of my life, I know how to balance the books. Wade took another step toward me, his fists clenched. You think you're so smart. I don't think I'm smart, Wade. I know I'm smart. Smart enough to record your confession just now. Smart enough to document everything. Smart enough to make sure that everyone, your former employer, your ex-girlfriend, Lora's parents, our neighbors, anyone who matters, knows exactly who you both really are. I gestured toward the open door, where our audience was growing despite the rain. Look around, Lora. This is your life now. This is what you chose when you decided I wasn't enough for you. public humiliation, a baby you can't afford, and a boyfriend who just confessed that he never wanted any of it. She looked toward the door, seeing the neighbors for the first time, realizing that her private meltdown had become public entertainment. "Grant, please, close the door. We can work this out privately." Privately? Like you conducted your affair privately? Like you planned to deceive me privately? No, Lora. You made this public the moment you decided to humiliate me. Now you get to live with the consequences. Wade was looking around wildly, finally understanding that his drunken confessions had been witnessed by half the neighborhood. "This is insane," he muttered. "No, Wade. Insane was thinking you could destroy my life without consequences. Insane was assuming I'd just roll over and take it." I walked back to where they were standing, both of them looking lost and desperate in my living room. "Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to leave my house. You're going to figure out how to handle your situation, the baby, the finances, all of it, without involving me. And if either of you ever tries to contact me again, ever tries to blame me for the mess you created, I promise you that tonight will seem like a pleasant conversation." "You can't just throw us out in the rain," Lora protested. "Watch me." I gestured toward the door again. Through the opening, I could see police lights approaching. Mrs. Patterson had indeed called for help. "Your audience is waiting, and the police are on their way. I suggest you leave before they get here and start asking questions about Wade's condition and his ability to drive." Wade stumbled toward the door, muttering curses under his breath. Lora followed more slowly, her shoulders shaking with sobs. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. "I loved you, Grant. I really did." "No, Lora. You loved what I could provide. There's a difference." She stepped out into the rain, and I closed the door behind them both. Through the window, I watched the final act of their drama play out in my front yard. Wade slipped in the mud trying to get to his car. Lora stood in the rain, crying and gesturing helplessly while the neighbors watched from their porches. The police arrived and had to help Wade into the passenger seat. He was clearly too drunk to drive. The last thing I saw before closing the curtains was Lora sitting in the driver's seat of Wade's BMW, her head in her hands, completely alone despite being surrounded by people. I turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, the storm continued to rage, washing away the last traces of my old life and clearing the ground for whatever came next. Numbers don't lie, but people do. And sometimes, the most important calculation you can make is figuring out what your dignity is worth and what you're willing to pay to get it back. I had paid in full, and the books were finally balanced.